Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Custom.
Mom taught me
Yeah.
how to rearrange verses
Yeah.
and rewrite
Yeah.
songs on the fly.
On the fly. You do it.
Okay, we're gonna do Nothing is Impossible now by Jeff Hunt. If Kyle's on
Well, we
board.
kind of need Kyle on this song.
I think.
Oops. Oh, this one shot.
Okay, what are we playing?
Nothing is impossible.
Kind of need you on this one, bud.
Through you, I can do anything. I can do all things. 'Cause it's you who gives me strength. Nothing is impossible. Through you, my eyes are open. Strongholds are broken. I am living by faith. Nothing is impossible. Not gonna live by what I see. Not gonna live by what I see. Deep down I know that you're here with me. I know that you can do anything. Through you, I can do anything. I can do all things. 'Cause it's you who gives me strength. Nothing is impossible. Through you, my eyes are open. Strongholds are broken. I am living by faith. Nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. I'm not gonna live by what I see. I'm not gonna live by what I feel. Deep down I know that you're here with me. And I know that you can do anything. Through you, I can do anything. I can do all things. 'Cause it's you who gives me strength. Nothing is impossible. Through you, my eyes are open. Strongholds are broken. I am living by faith. Nothing is impossible. I believe, I believe. Oh, I believe in you. I believe, yeah. I believe in you. I believe, oh, I believe in you. I believe in you. I believe in you. Through you, I can do anything. I can do all things. 'Cause it's you who gives me strength. Nothing is impossible. Through you, my eyes are open. Strongholds are broken. I am living by faith. Nothing is impossible. I believe, yeah. I believe in you. I believe in you.
Salmon Town.
We did a drop
Salmon
out.
too.
Yes.
I guess that part was custom.
So we're gonna do one that we haven't done for a while, called The Goodness of God. So really like the words on this one.
And it's by a whole list of people. Jen Johnson, Ed Cash, Jason Ingram, Ben Fielding, Brian Johnson, based on the recording by Jen Johnson.
My kids really like this one when I used to teach. You ready? I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me all my days. I've been held in your hand from the moment that I wake up till I lay my head. I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire, darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father, known you as a friend. I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God. Amen. I like that song. All right, well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, people, for playing. Yep.
Say something.
Can I-
Make sure I read it.
Okay, test. Okay, I'm good. So can I got this off?
Yeah.
Make that. Thank you, guys. Thank you. All right, so glad you're all here tonight. I have the coolest thing that I got to study this week. Every week I do this, I always learn something new, and we're going through the Bible chronologically and learning new things about what it has to say. It's so weird that I've read the Bible so many times, but every time I go through it, I find something new. Something, God shows me something new, a different layer. Well, we're picking off in our chronological study on, now we're to the life of Jesus. Now we're into the last week of Jesus' life before the crucifixion. And this, what we're talking about tonight is super, super interesting and a little strange because we have to talk about Judas. so if you remember last week, we left off when Judas snuck away to betray Jesus. Okay? And so that's kind of what we learned. And, we learned that he went to the high priest, and different gospels say different things about the whole situation. But one gospel said it was 30 pieces of silver that he decided to betray Jesus. Now, see, the chief priests had been looking to kill Jesus for many months, but they knew they couldn't do it in public because he was very popular and there would be a riot. So they had to look for a time when Jesus was all by himself or just very few people. So there's not a riot. So the only way they had to find Jesus at night. But if you remember during the Passover, we talked about last week, he goes into the city, goes into the temple, preaches, talks to people, and then at night he goes up to the Mount of Olives and sleeps. And so the only people that knew where he slept would have been the disciples, his very closest friends. So then we know that Jesus goes and betrays Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And the pieces of silver, the Bible doesn't say if it was a drachma or a shekel or what. So you really don't know with the pieces of silver whether it was like 1 month's wages or 3 months' wages. It definitely wasn't as much as as Mary, who poured the whole jar of nard on Jesus' feet. That was a year's wages. And if you remember, Jesus got mad at her and said she was wasting the money that the jar was worth. And so we don't know if that was the beginning of the end, because Jesus called Judas out and said, hey, you're always going to have the poor with you, but you won't always have me. And so we also know that when she broke the jar, it's like she was anointing him for burial. So there's a lot of things we learn. But what we don't know is why Judas did this. So there's some ideas maybe that theologians have different thoughts on this. Maybe Judas is angry because he was expecting Jesus to take over the Romans. So Judas kind of saw himself, he was the treasurer, he kept all the money, kind of saw himself as the potential big shot. When Jesus came into the kingdom, he would have had a place, people would have known who he was. And so he is disappointed, possibly, that Jesus didn't turn out to be what he was thinking. Jesus had the triumphal entry where he rode into town humbly on a donkey, but people were shouting his name. But then he goes up to the temple and he overturns the tables. And maybe at that moment, Judas realized, you know what? This guy is ticking off all the wrong people. And this is not what I thought it would be. So Jesus gets to this place where Jesus is not the Messiah that he was wanting. And another theory is Judas is pushing Jesus' hand. So like Judas has seen Jesus heal people, raise the dead, cast out demons, feed thousands of people. So maybe Judas is thinking that he needs to push Jesus' hand a little bit and force him to react. I mean, he has seen Jesus react. Jesus did like flip over the money changers and call out all the hypocrites. Jesus hates hypocrites. He calls them out, hates it. So Judas knows he's got this bone inside of him that's like not going to settle for anything better than the will of, anything other than the will of God. And he definitely hates hypocrisy. So maybe Judas is thinking, well, I'm going to push his hand and force him to take over the situation. We don't really know. Maybe Judas is actually seeing, like we mentioned at the temple grounds, that Jesus is now treading on some dangerous grounds. And maybe he's like, all of a sudden, I don't want to be tied up with this guy, because I'm not going to go down with Jesus. And maybe that's where he's at. I'm not going down with Jesus. I'm going to get out. I'm going to make it look like I'm getting out before things get bad. He knows the Jewish priests are super agitated and trying to kill him. They're trying to kill Jesus and have been for some time. Two of the Gospels say that Judas yielded to Satan's influence, specifically even naming Satan. This is important because I think there's some people that think that God just created Judas to be the betrayer. That's not true. Judas was in the friendship of Jesus. He walked with him. He was close to him. He was one of the friends of Jesus. And for those of us who have ever been betrayed by a friend, That is the worst betrayal. So Judas was in the friendship of Jesus. We know that the Jews are trying to kill Jesus. They would have found a way. They would have found a way. We didn't have to have Judas to do this. God didn't make Judas to make him do this to send him to hell. That's not what happened. Judas just decided he was not going to hang his hat on Jesus anymore at some point. And so we do know that that God used the timing of Judas betraying him so that Jesus would be sacrificed on the time of the sacrificial lamb. So the timing seems perfect, but the Jews were already looking for Jesus. They were already searching for where he was at night. Judas just gave him a little tip-off. But in the meantime, and we have to remember, people are sure easy to condemn Jesus, but honestly, how many people leave the faith of Jesus because Jesus just didn't deliver what they want? Or they just didn't quite trust him? Or maybe they're like super disappointed in what Jesus provided. I know I've been there where I was super disappointed about this. In the moments that I didn't trust God, I didn't trust the events that were going to happen. In those moments, I was acting like Judas. So, we're really easy to cast off on Judas. Even Peter denied Jesus. The difference between Judas and Peter is that Peter apologized. Peter was sorry. Peter repented. Judas was really sorry, but in the end, he killed himself because he couldn't see a way out of what he'd done. That makes you realize that part of him was really, it's so confusing. Why did he do it if then he regretted it? Because then he realized that he was in the wrong. But he didn't seek Jesus' forgiveness, which is really sad. But anyway, while Judas is going and doing all this and getting ready, its time is coming. Jesus knows it's coming. He knows what's going to happen. It's the time that they celebrate the Last Supper, which is the Passover. We call it the Last Supper, but it was just the Passover supper. And if you recall, really important, the Jewish people also always celebrated the Passover. It was the holiday, like the biggest holiday on the Jewish calendar, that remembered when they came out of Egypt, when they were freed from slavery. That was the meal. It's like Christmas for us, That was the meal that they remembered. Hey, remember when God brought us out of Egypt and he took us out of slavery? And remember how the angel of death came to everyone except where the blood of the lamb was on the door. This is the night that they celebrated the Passover feast. Super, super important. And what's really interesting, is more miraculous today, is that at this time, is that the teacher says, my time has come and I will eat my Passover meal with my disciples. But here's the weird thing. He said, go and prepare the Passover. Now, remember, in Passover, during the time of Passover, everyone comes to Jerusalem. Everybody. To celebrate the Passover. So, so many people come to Jerusalem that even Pilate, he was the legate over that whole area. He lived in Caesarea Maritime, and he came over to Jerusalem. The only reason he was there is because it was the Passover, and he had to make sure there were no uprisings. He didn't like to be there. He wasn't happy to be there. He had to leave his little palace on the beach, on the shore, to come over to Jerusalem in case somebody decided to rebel against Rome. At the same time, Herod, who was over Galilee, he decided he is kind of a pretend Jew. So he comes down to Jerusalem during the Passover so he can sort of pretend like he's into the Jewish thing, So, and remember, he's the one who executed John the Baptist. It's really important. It's Herod Antipas. He's the one who executed John the Baptist. So, all of these people are in Jerusalem. So when Jesus said, go into town, and two of the Gospels say, you will see a guy carrying a pitcher, follow that guy to the house, and then when you get to the house, tell him the Lord needs the room to celebrate the Passover with his disciples. And that the guy would just say, yeah, go up. And he said there would be a big, large room ready and set for you to have the Passover. Now that's miraculous. It really is, because this is the Passover. How many extra rooms do you think people have for a group of people, 12 people, to have a meeting on the Passover when everybody's in town? It's crazy. So everybody's there. He goes there, and to celebrate the Passover with his disciples. Jesus knows this is his last meal before he is betrayed and found and crucified. This is it for him. He knows it. He knows it. So, but it is miraculous that there was somebody ready with this room in a crowded, busy city over the biggest feast in Jerusalem. That is miraculous. And so then while they're there, the first thing that he does when it's all set is he decides to wash the disciples' feet. Now this to me is really, really interesting, because in those days, only a servant would wash your feet. And they washed their feet if you were a wealthy person or had a servant, because they wore sandals everywhere. Pastor Matt, you can feel this. And so if you're walking around in sandals, your feet are going to get really dirty, right? So when somebody washed your feet, then your feet, they don't have like boots like we wear. Their feet were really dirty. And so Jesus takes off his robe, which is a form of humility, wraps a towel around, or a cloth, I don't know if they had towels like we have towels, around his waist, and he washes every one of his disciples' feet. And that is significant. And because he is acting like a servant. And again, they're looking at him like, you're not the conqueror that we thought you were. And when he gets to Peter, Peter's like, oh no, you're not washing my feet. And Jesus said, it is required for you to have salvation, for you to be a part of me, I have to wash your feet. But he's this big fisherman, he's like, this is uncomfortable. This is not manly for you to wash my feet, And Jesus said, you have to. And so then Peter said, wash my head, wash my body, because I want to be part of you. So what Jesus is showing is this total act of humility and submission. And what we learn here is that Jesus is our perfect leader, our perfect example of what a leader, a Christian leader should be. And he is not arrogant. He is not using power. He is serving the people in the most humble way. And that's why he always says the greatest among you will be your servant, not meaning that the servants will be great, but the people that move the most people, the people that do the most for the kingdom of God, will be those who are serving people. So, number one, he's showing servant leadership. In John 13:12, it says, after washing their feet, he put back on his robe and sat down and asked, do you understand what I am doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because I am. And since I am your Lord and teacher, I have washed your feet. You should wash each other's feet. And I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth. Slaves are not greater than their masters, nor are messengers greater than the ones who sent the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. And so if you think about it, he's saying, be a servant to other people like I am a servant. And he's saying, God will bless you. But honestly, when you do good things for people, don't you feel that? Don't you feel like what it is to be part of the hands and feet of Christ? To be a blessing to somebody? That in itself is a blessing. We don't do it to get a blessing. It is the blessing. That's the blessing, is to be a servant of people. There's nothing more satisfying. Also, Jesus is showing us true humility. In our society where everybody is teaching you to be all about yourself and to concentrate on you, Jesus shows the exact opposite of showing humility and thinking about others greater than himself. He does the action of the most humble servant. Jesus, by doing this, is also demonstrating that we all need to be cleansed by him. You don't get cleaned up to take a bath. You come to Jesus and he cleans you up. That, to me, that's really significant. Jesus does the cleansing. We don't have to. All we have to do is say, yes, Jesus, cleanse me. But he is showing us that and that's why he tells Peter, Peter, you have to be cleansed by me. You can't do this on your own, Peter. It doesn't matter if you're a big, strong guy. You can't do this without me. You need me to cleanse you. I think that's really important then. So, all four Gospels say that while they're eating this special banquet, this special celebration, one of them, Jesus tells them that one of them will betray him. And they're all having this conversation like, not me, what, me? Who's going to betray him? Who's going to do it? Not me. And Jesus is dipping bread and saying, whoever dips this bread with me. And then he tells Judas, go and do what you have to do. Now Judas leaves. Now I don't think any of these guys had any idea what Judas was doing. I don't think they had any idea. I think they just thought Jesus is sending him out to get something. He has a task to do. He has something he has to do. I don't think any of them even thought one thing about it. But Peter, of course, turns to Jesus. Peter is kind of bullheaded, always saying, he says, doesn't matter what happens, Jesus. I will die with you. And Jesus looks right at Peter and says, Peter, before the cock crows, in other words, before this night is over, you will deny me 3 times. And so Peter's like, what? I'm never going to deny you. That's crazy. That's crazy. So the next thing that happens after that is that they have what we call now the Last Supper, and he breaks bread and he blesses it and he says to them, take this and eat, for this is my body. Now, that's not part of the Jewish custom. Okay, so and so they're looking at him like, what are you doing? This is not the Jewish custom. We're celebrating the Passover. But he's breaking the bread and he's saying, this is my body broken for you. And he's saying that because he's about to go to the cross. They have no clue what he's doing or what he's saying, but later it will be very important. Same thing, takes the cup. This is my blood that is poured out for you. Drink it. And remember that I'm going to sacrifice for you. And in fact, it says more exactly, he says, take this cup, for this is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and its people, and is poured out as a sacrifice to forgive the sins of many. Mark my words, I will not drink again until the day that I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. So that is really interesting because he's telling them what's about to happen. They have no clue. They think they're talking about, remember when we left Egypt and God did miracles, and he's like, what is Jesus saying? They just don't quite get it. But later, they will know. This same scripture piece, which is Matthew 26, 28 through 30, also says that then they sang a hymn and went to the Mount of Olives. But different Gospels record that he said some more things before they went to the Mount of Olives. And so what Jesus is showing them right here is that he's the fulfillment. Like just as the perfect lamb was the sacrifice, now he's the sacrifice. He's trying to show them, I'm the sacrifice. And so that's why Christians today, that is a major, called the Eucharist, or it's called communion. That is a really important part of Christian practice. But I feel like it disturbs me because I feel like sometimes we make it into a cheap ritual because people don't realize that if you really listen to what Jesus is saying and you really take that on, no one can go around practicing self-serving Christianity and take on what Jesus said in the Last Supper. I mean, if you really take on the bread that Jesus broke for, the body that Jesus broke for you, if you really take on the blood that he shed for you, then you can no longer go on living for yourself. And so sometimes I get irritated if we do communion without really realizing how super sacred and amazing it is what Jesus did for us. And that we have to hold that. If you really think about it, if you honestly took the sacrifice, the sacraments, the way Jesus allowed it, you'd be getting saved. You would be saying yes to Jesus. I want to be with you, Jesus. I want to take on your holiness. Forgive my sins. I want to be part of what you offer to me, which is amazing. It's not trite. It's not something light. It is serious business. So during that time that he's doing that, Jesus leaves. Judas has now left the room. He's gone. He's going to get the soldiers from the chief priests. These would have been soldiers that worked for the temple first. So he's going to do that. In the meantime, Jesus starts talking. It says right after he left, he starts talking about some really important things. Before they leave the upper room, he says these things. He says, this is John 13:31. Love one another as I have loved you. Your love for each other will show the world that you are my disciples. So he's saying, now you got to love one another. And then the disciples, and he's like, I'm leaving you. But I'm making a place for you. I'm going, but I'm going to come back. And the disciples ask Jesus where he's going. They're confused. But John 14 tells us that Jesus says, if you love me, obey my commandments. And I will ask my Father, and he will give you another advocate who will never leave you. He is the Holy Spirit who leads you into all truth. And the world cannot receive him because it isn't looking for him, and doesn't recognize him. But you know him because he lives in you. No, and later he lives in me, and later he will live in you. No, I will not abandon you as orphans. I will come to you. So right now he's telling you, I'm going away, but soon the Holy Spirit's going to come. He said that in the upper room. And according to John 16, this was a really interesting metaphor that Jesus gives. He says, what we're about to go through right now is like a woman in labor. It's like he's saying we're going to go through something terrifying, which labor is terrifying, right? And both of my labors for my kids were life-threatening and terrifying. But in the end, I had these beautiful babies, right? And then you forget. Yeah, I almost lost my life because of that thing. But here we are, I got my baby, right? And so this is interesting. Jesus is comparing what they're about, the crucifixion and this emptiness they're about to go through. But in the end, he says, there will be joy, just like when you get the baby. That's pretty amazing comparison. He's trying to warn them. We're going to go through something terrifying. What could be more terrifying than crucifixion? I found out today that the word excruciating comes from the word from the cross. Excruciating, suffering from the cross. That's where we get the word, that's where crucifixion, excruciating, came from. That's amazing. So he's saying, we're going to go through something really excruciating, but in the end, we will rejoice. And so he's telling them all this ahead of time. Of course, they forgot in the event, just like you forget when you're in labor, right? That something good's going to happen because you're like, this is not a good time right now. Okay? You might say bad things to your husband, whatever, I don't know. So, but Jesus is preparing them for the terror that they're about to go through. So then he goes on to say, all those who love me will do as I say. Understand that the people who claim to follow Jesus, but don't do as they say, do not belong to him. That's really important. If you belong to Jesus, you'll do what he says. Now, does it mean you're perfect? No. But it means you have to lean on him, because you can't do it on your own. But everyone who wants to follow Jesus leans on him and does what he says. John 16:33 says, I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. This is really cool. Here on earth, this is so important. Goes back to what Judas was thinking. Here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows. Many terrifying experiences. But take heart because I have overcome the world. John 16:33. Again, here on earth you have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. Now, this next part is so, I thought this next part happened when Jesus was out in the Garden of Gethsemane. But I remember reading this passage in high school and actually crying. This next piece, Jesus is praying for his disciples, and he's praying for us, the future disciples of Jesus Christ. And I was in my basement room in Green River when I read this passage in a way that it spoke to me. I will never forget it because I cried. I cried because I realized Jesus is about to go to the cross, and he's praying for his disciples, and he's praying for me. He's praying for me. And I'll show you how you know that. Here's what John 17:13. So this was in the book of John. You can go read it for yourself. So amazing. He said, now I'm coming to you. I told them many things while I was with them in this world so that they would be filled with joy. I have given them your word. So he's praying to the Father. And the world hates them because they do not belong to the world, just as I don't belong to the world. And I am not asking you to take them out of the world, but to keep them safe from the evil one. That really struck me. I am not asking you to take them out of the world. Because you know what? Like when you come to Jesus, kind of like, why not beam me up, Scotty, right? You know, let's just forget it. It's hard, you know? But he's like, no beam me up, Scotty. I'm here for you. So he's like, I'm not asking you to take me out of this world, but to keep them safe from the evil one. They do not belong to the world any more than I do. Make them holy by your truth. Teach them your word, which is truth. Just as you sent me into the world, I am sending them into the world. And I will give myself as a holy sacrifice for them so they can be made holy by your truth. And I am praying not only for these disciples, but for all who will ever come to believe in their message. Believe in my message through them. So that's us. So he's praying for his disciples, and he thinks ahead 2,000 years to you. Help them. That's amazing to me. And when I was a teenager in Green River, that spoke to me. That spoke to me. It changed me. I cried. I sat in my room by myself and I cried that Jesus would care enough to care about me 2,000 years ago. I think that's amazing. And so then it occurred to me that as the sacrifice he was for me, just like he sacrificed for everyone, not just me, but everyone. And he would have done it for any one person, even alone. And he's preparing to go to the cross. That is so touching, so amazing. And then here's this Judas who doesn't even get what's going on. And he just decides, Jesus is just not enough for me. He's not enough for me. But Jesus saw you way ahead of time and said, yeah, help them, because they're going to go through some bad, excruciating, terrifying things. But help them to know that I'm with them. I'm never going to leave them. And so to tie all this together, and then we'll pick up when Jesus gets arrested. But to tie all these pieces together, we have to ask, think about a time where you betrayed Jesus because you just didn't think that what he offered was enough for you. And maybe he disappointed you. Maybe the excruciating things that you were going through were just like, this is not cool. I am not good with this. But now Jesus offers us a chance to not be tempted, because that's what Satan does. He's tempting you. He's tempting you to say, this is so not worth it. That's the temptation of Satan, which is how he got to Judas. Satan tempted Judas to go walk out on this guy. He is trouble. Get away. He is trouble. And we are all going to be tempted to say, this is just too hard. I just can't do this. I'm hanging my hat on a different star. I'm not going this way. And we're all going to be tempted. I've been tempted that way. And I just have to learn to exercise my faith and say, I will trust in Jesus. I will trust in Jesus. I will trust in Jesus no matter what happens. I will just do it. And then something really cool is when we celebrate the Eucharist, or communion as people call it, we have to remember that he suffered for us. That there's two choices really. There's death and there's Jesus. That's it. There's death, destruction, selfishness, whatever Satan has to offer, and there's Jesus, and there's life and eternal life. It's simple as that. And then, and we have to remember that when we celebrate communion, we should take it very serious. It's not just a flippant thing. It's very sacred. And then remember that 2,000 years ago, Jesus was thinking about you. And you say, how can that be? There are millions of people in the world. Because Jesus is God. He can think about everything at the same time. And he was thinking about you and praying for you and begging for you. He's going to the cross and he's thinking about us and how we're going to suffer and how we're going to get discouraged and how we're going to get down. And he's thinking about us. I think that is just so amazing. It's just amazing. And then we have to remember that he came to lay down his life for everybody. But it's a personal choice, you know. Jesus laid down his life as a servant so that we could also become servants of Jesus Christ. So people will know us as servants because we serve people. And that's how people will recognize us as Christians. And if we're not doing that, then we're not really Christians. How you treat people is the truest test of your Christianity. Which means Christianity, and especially Christian leadership, should never be about self, but always about people. And one of the reasons that we have so many people leaving the church, I think, and there's some bad churches. People are burned by church. I totally get that. There's some bad hypocritical things happening in church. I get it. But I think people are leaving the faith, some of them because our society, our default culture is all about me. And that's really hard. So like when things get hard, and we sometimes will refer to our default culture. And our society is teaching everybody it's all about you. And if your default, when things get hard, if you refer to your default culture, whatever it is, that can hang you up. Because I promise you it's not about you, it's about Jesus Christ. And you will never find peace and joy or happiness without him. End of story. It'll never be enough without Jesus.
I'm aboard this train.